Hello, friends, and welcome back to Sunshine Strategies Radio. I'm your host, Jen McMillin, and this show exists for one simple reason to help families across central Illinois make sense of the world around us. Each week, we try to do three things together: look for what's happening in our region, explain the civic systems behind those stories, and highlight the people who are quietly building strong communities. Because the truth is, democracy isn't just something that happens in Washington. It happens in classrooms, in local businesses, and sometimes in places you might not expect, like maybe earlobes, for example. That brings me to today's story. So let's get into it. I've been trying all week to come up with something at least mildly funny to share because this podcast really is supposed to be a happy place for me, something fun that I can do and vent about the world events. But the news I have to talk about today isn't funny or happy, not even a little bit. The biggest story of this week: whether or not the United States is at war with Iran. And all I can think about is my high school friend, Sam. Now, Sam was an unremarkable student. Just ask Mr. Henry. But he is a genuinely good human being. He joined the U.S. Marines in 2001. I was a high school sophomore at that time, and I remember being incredibly proud of him. And then I saw him after basic training. I was astonished by the physical transformation he went through. His waist and his face had lost weight, but his earlobes had not. And then in 2003, we went to war in Iraq. And suddenly I wasn't proud anymore. I was scared and angry and terrified for my friend Sam and so many others. It's no coincidence that I cast my first vote that same year, because that was the year I realized something very important. When your government sends someone you love to war, politics stops being theoretical. Suddenly, it's not about speeches or cable news arguments or party loyalty. It's about real people, people like my friend Sam. So let's set aside for a moment whether or not the Trump administration even has the authority to go to war without Congress. There's another question that comes before that one. And that is, does the United States have the authority, moral or otherwise, to go to war with Iran? To tell an entire nation whether or not they're allowed to possess nuclear weapons? My answer today is unequivocally no. Not because Iran's leaders are good, and not because the world should expand nuclear weapons. Rather, because of who is leading us. Looking at American leadership today, there are very few people in power who personally know someone who has fought in a modern war, let alone lived through one. After the Iraq debacle, we suffered another blow to our republic. 16 years ago now, the Supreme Court decided Citizens United, opening the floodgates for unlimited outside money in American politics. And now we are seeing the true cost of that decision. The true impact of allowing the wealthy to dominate our political system. Because our republic doesn't just rest on presidents and senators. No. It rests on the judgment of citizens who have borne the costs of our nation's decisions. The people who served. The people who have sacrificed. The people whose families sat at home hoping that phone would never ring, that doorbell would never sound. But the wealthy, people like Donald and Barron Trump, like Gavin Newsom, and even my friend JB, because of their wealth, they have rarely had to bear those consequences. War to them is still largely theoretical. For me and my friend Sam, it never was. And that's why, until someone can convince me, Sam, and every other American whose life might be on the line, why we should risk American lives, prosperity, and safety in another war, I'm demanding we stop all operations. Because so far, the only people whose moral authority I trust are the ones telling me that this is a terrible situation for all of us. Now, I know that that really wasn't the most humorous story. I hope you did get a good laugh out of my friend Sam's earlobes. But let's move on to something I hope is a little happier and a lot more local. Let's move on to our sunrise brief. There's a quiet but powerful story coming out of Lincoln Land Community College this week. 38 students from that school have qualified for the Illinois SkillsUSA state competition after performing well in regional competitions earlier this year. These students are training in fields like automotive technology, diesel equipment repair, HVAC, culinary arts, and baking and pastry arts. And this competition itself isn't just academic. The students are judged by industry professionals on real world job skills, things like diagnosing mechanical problems, preparing professional dishes, or troubleshooting equipment. The winners of the Illinois competition will advance to the national championships in Atlanta, Georgia later this year. Now, why does this matter for families? Because while we spend a lot of time talking about 4-year college paths, the reality is that communities are built by people with skills. And that sounds more like mechanics, chefs, and technicians. These are the people who keep our towns running. And when local students succeed in competitions like this, it's not just a personal achievement, it's a signal that our region is still producing the skilled workforce that keeps America moving. Now, moving on to another story that's happening right here in my hometown of Decatur, a community forum focused on small businesses is scheduled for March 9th at 5:30 p.m., giving local entrepreneurs the opportunity to share challenges and opportunities that they face operating within the city. These kind of forums might sound routine, but they're actually a really important piece of local democracy. Small businesses often see economic changes before anyone else does. They know when customers are spending less, supply costs are rising, or regulations are making it really hard to operate. So I commend the city of Decatur for listening to the people actually doing the work on the ground. And if you've ever run a small business before and you live nearby, come on down. Now let's move on to something that makes community life richer: arts and events. Across several Illinois communities, there are upcoming gatherings that remind us that communities don't survive on economics alone. They also survive on culture and connection. One example comes from a regional gala event that will feature a country music performer who also spent time in the NFL, blending sports and music in a way that celebrates rural culture and entertainment traditions. Events like these matter more than we sometimes realize because they give people a reason to get together and celebrate. They're creating shared experiences within our local community. So, if you are in the Monticello area, look out for this event. I'll post it in the comments below. And for today's big picture, if you zoom out, all of today's stories connect in an interesting way. You've got students training for skilled careers, business owners sharing their challenges, and community events bringing people together. Different stories, different people, but they all point to the same idea. Communities thrive when people show up and contribute their talents. Some people build engines, some people build businesses, and some people build culture. And some of us are helping create the civic spaces where we can actually talk to one another. There's an old idea in American life that progress comes from big national moments. But most of the time, progress actually looks quieter than that. It looks like these students learning a trade and communities gathering together in a room to ask the simple question: how can we make this place better? That's the real work of building a community. And it's here in central Illinois, it's happening every day. Thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of Sunshine Strategies Radio. Again, I'm Jen McMillin. And if you want to learn more about the stories we talked about today, we'll have links in the episode description. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep building the communities our families deserve. I'll see you next time.